Hello friends, welcome back. Today's video is a highly requested sewing tutorial specifically for sewing together my crochet lovey patterns. This customer wanted a simple granny square design with a bunny attachment. So there's no fancy details here, we just have a very nice, elegant granny square pattern here. The first thing we're going to do is sew together our bunny head. And I want to talk to you guys a little bit about the tools that I use because I get a lot of questions about this. I really prefer using T-pins compared to your regular ball pin needles because the ball pin needles, they have a lot of give here. They're not meant to hold a lot of pressure on them. They will bend fairly easily. With T-pin, they are specifically made for blocking, holding a lot of pressure on them, and they do not give at all. So I highly suggest using T-pins. If all you have are ball pin needles, that's fine too. The T-pins will just make your life a little bit easier. I also want to talk a little bit about the needles that I use, the sewing needles. As you can see, I have some long needles here. I have a 5-inch blunted doll making needle. This is my favorite. She's my ride or die. I probably have like 20 of these in my arsenal. This is a Susan Bates doll making needle. It is 5-inch blunted needle. I also have a 6-inch doll making needle, but this one's pointed, so I don't use this one very much unless I have to get through a very, very firm fabric. So I really do prefer the blunted needles. That way you're not catching any unneeded fibers or polyfill or fabric along the way with that sharp needle. Now, as you can see, compared to a regular sewing needle, they're quite different. This is a very sturdy needle. Like I said, she's my favorite. So this is the one that I'm going to be using today. This is, again, a Susan Bates 5-inch doll making needle, and I will be using my T-pins as well. Now first I'm going to pin the little bunny together. I always start with the ears. And I always just look for the best placement where I want them and pin it down. The more pins, the better. I'm a little bit overkill with my pinning, but that's okay. This one needs to be moved down a little. Get them right where you want them. And I think that looks pretty good. Check from all angles. Oop, this one is still a little bit higher, isn't she? Move her down. It's all about, trial and error. I rarely get my pinning correct on the first placement, and that's just fine. Now you'll see I also have the tail of the head here still attached, and it's pretty long. This is the tail that I'm going to be using to sew to the blanket. I'm just going to move that one out of the way. And I like that placement, so I'm going to grab my needle here, thread my yarn. I always like to sew along the bottom, the side in the front, and the side in the back. also like to go through the stitches as opposed to around. That way it hides your tail while you're sewing it, and you don't see any stitching or sewing there because it's hidden. See, it's hidden there. Go back through the ear and come up to the side. You always need to remember that these are going to babies, so the more secure these parts, the better. You don't want any loosey-goosey stitches, ears, nose, eyes, because babies are, you know, they put things in their mouths. So we need to be very mindful when we are sewing these lovies together. Don't be afraid to pull tight. I'm quite aggressive with my sewing of the lovies. Well, with my sewing of all parts, just because I pull the yarn fairly tight there. Remove the pins as we go. Go back into that first stitch there that we went through, and then I'm going to go out through the hole in the bottom of the head. I haven't closed up that hole yet. I'm going to take my needle straight out through the bottom. And now this ear is attached. Now we're going to do the same with this ear. Always being mindful to get everything as identical as possible. If you are a perfectionist like I am, it's very important. See, I didn't get that front stitch there, so we're gonna go back and make sure she is nice and secure there. That's why I like to leave long tails. I don't like to limit myself, because sometimes you need to go back and forth and make sure that everything is nice and secure. Go up to the side, in the back, make sure everything is lining up with the other ear. Pins in the way. Grab a couple stitches from the ear, go back into the head, bring it to the front. Everything in the back is looking pretty even. Now we're going to do the same in the front. Go through the stitches. And tack it down. And come back down here and get the side of that ear again too. Just really make sure that that's on there. And again, we're going to bring that out through the bottom of the head. This is another reason why I like using these long needles. I say this in so many, like all my videos, all of my videos, I say this. I have a lot of control here with this needle because I'm not having to squish the head to get this. Say I were using this, I would really have to squish the head to be able to get a finger grip on here to pull it out. I also like to use pliers. If you have a hard time getting the needle out of the head, grab yourself a little plier and pull it. Save your fingers, use your tools. Okay, so now I'm going to find those two and I'm going to tie those together. And that way we know that those threads from the ears are not going to come undone. And then to hide those, I'm just going to thread those on my needle at the same time. And push them out through the back of the head. We take our scissors and just snip it off. Okay, so now we're going to move on to attaching the arms. We want the thumbs of any of the lovies, or if you have like a hoof detail on the llama or the giraffe, the pig, you want that to be facing upward. Because when we bring the arm forward, we want to see that little detail. So I usually put them both on there. I give myself about a ½ inch maybe of distance between the two, depending on the head. Some of the designs have a little bit larger heads. Could be dependent on how far away you place your arms. So just use your visual judgment here. You can always readjust your placement after you see how it's going to lay, and I'll show you what I mean. Lots of pins. Okay, so now we have the bunny should look like this. I'm gonna bring the arms, both of the arms forward. This can be a little fiddly, but it's okay. Bring the arms forward. Sometimes I like to go off to the side. You can go in the middle, off to the other side. Just kind of, everyone is different. You just play around with it. I think this one's gonna go off to this side here. So I'm going to pin and just look and see if that's how I like it. Yeah, he's cute, so I'm gonna take that pin out. I know that was confusing, but first I'm going to sew both of the arms flat onto the bottom of the head first. So the bottom of the head, both arms get sewn on before we do anything else. We're not going to attach it to the side of the head here until we attach the blanket. This is what I have come to learn works the best out of the dozens and dozens, maybe even 100 lovies that I have made. So we sew it on, very, very secure. This one doesn't necessarily have to be the prettiest of a sewing job. Not that I'm saying, you know, make a mess of it, but this gets hidden under the blanket. Nobody's going to see this. So if this is a little crooked, if it's a little wobbly in the end, that's okay. It'll all sort itself out. Okay, now I'm also going to sew down maybe a ¼ inch onto the side of the arms here. Oops, got myself in a little tangle here. There we go. And back into the arm. So sorry if you can hear all of the airplanes. I live fairly close to an airport. Okay, now we're going to do the same on the other side. Just get a good, secure tack down there. And bring it back out the back of the head because I'm going to use this tail again when I sew the arms to the side of the head here. In my previous patterns, when I was a baby designer and I was first learning how to make these myself, I had some of the patterns had you make little elbows where you would wrap the yarn around a few stitches and pull tight, which would bend the arm. And over time that can droop a little bit. I've gone back and I've amended most of my patterns to sew them to the side of the head. But if you have been following me and making my lovies for a few years now, you know that the elbows were an issue. So this is my way of rectifying that by sewing to the side of the head rather than make the elbows. That was long-winded, I apologize. Okay, so we're gonna go on to the next one and just pull these ends that you're not using out of the way. It's still, see, an issue. Okay. And we're just gonna start sewing this guy down too. The best you can to make it even between the sides of the head here. The distance on the arms, I mean. And go down the sides. Remove these. Didn't get that little guy there, so I'm gonna get him and go to the other side. Sorry if I'm moving fast here. It's just the same as the other one. And go down this side. And then we're gonna leave this tail here on the back of the head here. Hello. For when we tack down that side of the arm as well. And now moving on to sewing on the blanket, but I just want to show you, see, mine's not 100% even. It's not perfect. Nothing is when it's handmade, which is what I really enjoy. But when we pull these forward, see, I even accidentally sewed this guy's thumb a little bit too far this way. And I'm kind of glad that I did that because I want to show you how to put it forward. All you really got to do is just twist the arm a little bit. And then when you sew this down, you can tack that there and make it look even. And then this will be covered by the blanket, so nobody will see that. All right, let's attach the blanket. Let's first get the tails for the arms out of the way, and we're just gonna wrap them around the ears here for just a moment because we're gonna need those. I'm going to take the tail at the bottom of the head, and that's what we're going to be using for sewing. But first I'm going to try to place the blanket. There is no right or wrong way. This is just a traditional granny square blanket that I turn on each round, so each round is the right way. On some of the lovies, there is a right and a wrong way. Make sure that your right way is facing up when connecting the bunny this way. So let's see if I can. So your bunny is here. The right way is facing up. The wrong way will be attached to the bottom of the bunny. Hope that makes sense here. So we are going to attach it here. When I attach mine, I kind of use the arms for placement. The arm's width is usually a good reference to where I'm going to be sewing on my blanket, but I'm just going to double check that. So I'm just going to tack down the blanket to the bottom of the head. No rhyme or reason. Just really, really well. And I'm going to bring it forward, and I'm going to maneuver the arms forward just to look and see how much of that blanket is going to be poking out when we are finished sewing. And I am actually happy with that. I think that that's a good amount. Not too much, not too little. So I'm going to keep my placement here. Okay, I also want to show you the back of the head here. We want to make sure we pin high enough that we cover the sewing of the arms. So I'm going to bring this next one forward and pin it there. So I know that that white color here is the edge of my sewing. So I'm going to place another one or 2 or 7 over pin, like over pin right there, just so that we know that that's where we need to stop with our sewing. I also want to bring some of these pins out because I want to cover the bottom of the arms here when we move them forward. This one is actually in a really, really good position. So that's the edge of my sewing on that side. Let's come over here. This one needs, I think, needs to be moved up a little bit more. See, we want to cover that fold. Obviously, you don't need to go through and be this perfect. This is just how I do it, how I've started to kind of have like an autopilot over the last few years, how I do my bunnies. Now this front one, I'm gonna move this one up too, because we don't want it all the way up here. We wanna show the bottom of the bunny's head so that there's room for these to come over and the blanket to pop up out of. But we do wanna anchor it under the chin as well. Now you see I kind of have a circle or even a square. This is where my sewing is going to happen. I'm also keeping one in the middle here just for, I'll probably even put another one, just for anchoring purposes, so I know that that blanket is not going to move. So here's my tail, it's coming out of the back. I'm going to grab my needle and thread it on. I'm gonna move it to the center of the blanket here because it's coming out of the center of the head. Move it to the center of this. Okay. Move all of that out of the way. So now this doesn't have to be super pretty. This really won't be shown. Nobody will see this in the end. I'm going to leave this edge here for later. I'm going to do these parts first. So I'm just going to wrap around the stitches of the blanket. So here's 2 rounds here. I'm just going to go around and grab, I think that's a corner piece there. I'm just going to grab the stitches of the corner and just wrap that around a few times. Nobody will see this unless they're really trying to. Okay, so that's good. I'm going to remove that pin. Then I'm going to move up, twist and turn, move your blanket, your lovey, however you need to get a secure position. And again, I'm going to wrap it around this one a few times. Be overkill because these will be loved on, drooled on by babies. They will need to be washed. That's why I use an acrylic blend or a cotton blend, just because it does better in the wash. You don't, I mean, you can use wool if the person that you are giving it to knows how to care for the wool and they are careful with their babies around natural fibers, just from experience. Okay, so that is secure in the middle all the way up. I'm gonna come over, wrap around, and then go through the head. I'm going through the head here and come out where I have my other pin, and that's where it's on the arm. And I'm just gonna wrap around a few times here, going through the stitches of the arm, the head, whatever you can grab on the bunny or the animal. Wrap around and around. Now I'm going to turn. Hopefully all of that was in frame. Remove that pin because I know that's done. And go through down through the bunny and out through where we have pinned over here. This yarn that I use splits a little bit, so that's okay. I will list all of the yarn that I used on this lovey down in the description for anybody who is curious. Okay, so we did that one pretty well. I'm going to double check though before we go to the back. See, everything is tacked down with the exception of this. This will get tightened when we pull this to the next side, and that will all be covered when we are done. So I'm gonna go back to go back in the body here so that we can get to the back. I'm gonna come out my pin is splitting my yarn. Sorry, I was confused by what I was seeing there. There we go. I'm gonna come out to the back of the head where I wanna sew there. Okay. Now we really want to make sure that these are anchored down, but we really don't want to show our yarn tail while we do it. We don't want to be clumsy and show the stitches around there. So what I usually do is I come through and I go through the stitches this way. My pin split my yarn there, but that's okay, it'll be hidden. I'm going to go through the stitches this way and come out and anchor to the head. So I've gone through the stitches as opposed to around them and pull. You know, there's a lot of tails here. There's a lot of ends to be tripped up on, but just take your time and it'll be worth it. Okay, we're gonna pull that tight. Then I'm gonna go through I hope that was in frame. I'll do that again. So we're coming out of the head. We're gonna go through, remove your pins if needed, like right now they're being a pain. Go through your granny square stitches there. Come on. There we go. Talk to her, tell her she's doing a good job so she cooperates. And see how that has pulled it down flat without showing a lot of the stitching? I'm gonna remove that guy too. And I usually repeat that step a few more times because nobody's going to be seeing the stitching. Sorry if I'm making you dizzy there. I'm gonna come over here and anchor that side down. Turn her around, go through the stitches. Attach to the head. Nice and secure. Because this part is going to get a lot of tension when the baby, you know, cuddles, pulls on, chews on. So we want to make sure that we really get the corners and be a little overkill with our sewing here. So I'm going to bring it back to the inside of the blanket here, where I'm going to bring it to the center and knot it off. So I'm going to take some of those loops that I have created from earlier, doesn't matter which one, thread your needle through, and create yourself a little knot, and then hide the ends in the head and pull it through the top, and then we'll cut that off. And now that blanket is properly attached. It's not going anywhere. We can pull tight or hard on this and it's not going to go anywhere. And that's all attached in the back as well. So now I'm going to leave the blanket down and I'm going to attach my arms to the side of the head here using the pins. Keep those in place. Make sure your little thumbs are pointing upward. See, mine, even though I sewed it on a little bit wonky there, I can manipulate the arm and pin it and sew it the way I want it to look. So we will take our arm tail on this side. Hope I'm not moving too fast here for you. You can pause the video if you need to. I'm going to thread my needle. And I'm going to just sew along until I get about right underneath the eyeball. So you're going to sew all the way along the edge here until you reach maybe an inch or two. And again, we're going to go through the stitches and we're going to try to avoid going around them. In through the stitches. Try not to pull too incredibly tight right here if you're distorting your yarn there, depending on what yarn you're using. Could distort when you pull on it here on the edge. Okay, so I'm right about underneath the eye here. Looks good. Now I'm going to thread, I'll just thread this one through to the hand here. And I'm going to leave that there. Remove our pins and make sure that's secure, which it is. It's going to be a little bit unsecure here, but we're going to attach these two together with that yarn tail that I have just left there. Lots of steps here, but it's worth it, I promise. And who knows, maybe you've learned some new tips for sewing amigurumi as well, so all worth it. So this one is a little bit different because I've had to fold it, but we're just going to tack it down like that. And no one will ever know. Well, just you and I. I really enjoyed making this lovey. This customer asked me to recreate a lovey for her baby that's on the way, that is has a resemblance to the one that the older sibling had when she was a baby, so that's very special. I hope I did it justice for her. Okay, so now this one I'm not going to run through the hand just because we have this tail, but I am going to just run it through the back of the head, and I'm going to leave it there. Just leave it there. And I will remove these pins because now we need to sew the hands together. I'm going to use the tail from the hand that I just left here. And then we're simply just going to do a few stitches around here. Make sure you have it where you want it. I wanted mine off to the side here, so I'm actually going to move this down a few stitches. Like I said, it's all about trial and error. Nothing is ever nearly perfect the first time. So just find your proper placement where you want it to go. No rhyme or reason. and wrap some stitches around there. Pull tight because this will be a high tension point. This holds the blanket together up towards the top of the head. Also, from experience, oops, I popped a little tail out there. From experience, this is where the babies pull on a lot. I popped the tail from my arm out of here. I'll tuck that back in. I'm glad these real life things are happening on this video so that you can see how to resolve that if it happens to you. I've never had that happen before, so I'm glad I caught that on here. Okay, I think I've wrapped it around a good 3-4 times. I'm gonna go back through the arm and into the head. Another wonderful example of how these long needles are just glorious. And we're gonna pull that tight. Now I'm going to tie these two together. Make sure you're not pulling too tight on these. Make sure that these have enough room for that blanket to come up through. I'm just gonna tie these together with a simple knot. They are coming out through the same stitch. Same stitch they've come out of. Tie that together. Simple knot. You can triple it if you're overkill, like I usually tend to be. I'm just going to thread those and hide them again. If you have misshapen the head up there, you just take your needle, crochet hook, and reform and snip that off. Now we would be done, but we got to pull the blanket through, and I need to fix my little boo-boo here. So I'm just going to thread that on there, find where it came out of, and just push it to the back and snip off the excess. And it won't ever be seen again, hopefully. Now we take our blanket and we pop them through. And there you have your little lovey, all ready to go. Very secure, nothing is moving, everything is nice. He looks nice and snuggly, ready for his forever baby. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned lots of tips. Don't forget to subscribe, like the video, share it if you would like to. I would appreciate it. Thanks, guys.